And welcome back to Jerusalem Minute here on JNS TV. My name is Josh Hasten, coming to you from the JNS Media Hub in Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. Around the world is Alex Traiman, all the way in Washington, D.C., busy covering the visit of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House with President Trump. This is the second time Prime Minister Netanyahu has visited the White House. I think he's the only leader in the world to make two visits since Trump's inauguration in January. Alex, it's good to see you all the way around the world.
Good to see you, Josh, as well. And I think that there's a lot of world leaders that haven't even gotten the opportunity yet to meet President Trump once. So certainly to meet him twice is a demonstration of the loyalty and the friendship and the support of the United States to the state of Israel under this current administration.
I was watching the press conference last night, and lo and behold, there you had Alex Traiman there with the rest of the press corps, and he had the opportunity to ask a question. Alex, you asked President Trump directly if October 7th was the death knell of the two-state solution. That was your first question. And you asked if he would consider the Palestinian Authority a terrorist organization because of their pay-to-slay program. Unfortunately, the president did not answer your question. But he did talk about the Israeli hostages and how bad the situation was and is for those who are remaining in Gaza.
Was October 7th the death blow of the two-state solution, and would you consider classifying the Palestinian Authority as a terrorist organization for its continued pay-for-slay terror financing payments?
So October 7th was a horrible day that some people, they deny it. Now, I can't believe they deny it from the standpoint of it. They do it because they think it's good politically. But I've seen the tapes, I've seen things that you don't want to see. October 7th was a horrible day, and it will go down as one of the really bad days in the history of the world. It was a horrible, horrible thing that happened. And they grabbed some of these people. I'll give you an example. When I was with the 10 hostages a few weeks ago, I said, so how many are there? 59. I said, oh, so 59, so we can get 59. They sort of knew the territory pretty good. And I said, how are they doing? They said, well, only 24 are living, the rest are dead. And these are young people largely. Young people don't die. You know, young people have an amazing ability to live. They can live through horrible things, but these are young people. And when they said that 24 are living and the rest are dead.
Well, I think that he didn't answer the question directly, but because I framed the question around whether October 7th was the death blow to the two-state solution, he started the answer by talking about October 7th, and he talked about how that was actually one of the worst days in all of history. So, you know, the president obviously didn't want to get directly into the question of the Palestinian Authority at that time, but you could see that he is really standing side by side with Israel on the issue of, how to perpetrate this war. He didn't mention Israel's conduct in the war one time, or the words humanitarian aid never came up in the hour-long press conference. So I think we planted a seed with regard to the end of the two-state solution. The president was very clear that he also did seek a plan to resettle Gazans from the Gaza Strip. So perhaps the issue of the Palestinian cause, the two-state solution, really just needs to be dealt with in order right now. First, deal with the large population that is basically homeless, many of them homeless in Gaza, and then we can turn around and figure out what the deal is with the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinians living in Judea and Samaria.
It was good to see JNS there represented on a world stage, and also the fact that he actually brought up the hostages in the context of your question. Let's start by breaking down the issues, all the different topics which were discussed during that press conference based on the conversation the president had with Prime Minister Netanyahu. First of all is the tariffs, because that's really what sparked Prime Minister Netanyahu flying to Washington after Hungary. And we'll talk about Hungary later on. You were there as well. First of all, you had the 17% taxes announced, the tariff on Israeli goods being sold to the United States. That was announced on April the 2nd. And then yesterday you had Netanyahu and President Trump and a very good-hearted dialogue there about the tariffs. Netanyahu responding to the fact that the U.S. was launching those 17% tariffs. So if you can't break down the issue here, what's really going on? And will we see those 17% tariffs reduced as a result of that very good meeting that they had yesterday?
Josh, I think you're right. This trip started in Hungary. We were not planning on going to Washington. We didn't bring enough stuff for an extended trip, even. And while we were there, in fact, the day before we were going to leave Hungary, it was announced that the Wings of Zion was going to make another stop, much further away in Washington, and it came about because there was a three-way call while Netanyahu was in Hungary between himself, Viktor Orban, the prime minister of Hungary, and President Trump. The issue of the tariffs came up. The prime minister wanted to go speak to the president about it, and the president extended an invitation to come to Washington to address it in person. And I think for both leaders, this was a big win. Netanyahu always trying to be the first. As we mentioned just at the beginning of the show, Netanyahu was the first world leader to visit Donald Trump in the White House. He's now the first to visit twice while Trump is in the White House. You can remember back to COVID when the international community was telling world leaders that you weren't going to come out of the pandemic until everybody was vaccinated, and Netanyahu says, I want to get the vaccines first. And clearly, the tariffs is an issue that is affecting all nations around the world right now. The global markets are completely uncertain. We're seeing potentially, as Trump discussed, a resetting of the trade deficits between the United States and virtually all other countries, and certainly Israel was affected. It was announced that Israel was going to be slapped with a 17% tariff on its goods, and the United States is the number one export partner for the state of Israel. Mostly that relates to tech exports, medicinal products. Israel's a startup nation, and without the ability to export to its largest market and to be competitive when doing that, it could have been a significant blow to the Israeli economy. And the prime minister had actually announced just before Trump's initial presser about the tariffs that Israel was going to be dropping all tariffs against the United States. And I think that was done in hopes that Israel would not have been on the list of countries that was going to get tariffed. But then the next day, Israel was on the list. It's not clear if the Trump administration had received that memo before their press conference on this. So certainly Netanyahu wanted to get to Washington to discuss it. But I think more importantly, Netanyahu wanted to demonstrate global leadership. He wanted to come in a conciliatory fashion to the United States to demonstrate that he, as a strong proponent of free markets and fair markets, wanted to make a deal with the president. And I think for President Trump, this was very important, and it was a diplomatic win for him as well, because here you have Netanyahu providing global leadership, coming in with a conciliatory approach. And we can remember back several weeks ago when Vladimir Zelensky came into the Oval Office and didn't take a conciliatory approach, and it really didn't go well. And now other nations have a model to follow. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was very clear that Israel would remove all of the trade barriers to free and fair trade with the United States. Was committed to taking quick action. He said it's not just words, it's not just thoughts, like you're going to see in the very short term, that there's going to be clear action. And I think that the president now can turn to that and look and appreciate that Netanyahu did that. And it's a good place for Netanyahu to be, because the president has given so much to Netanyahu. So for Netanyahu to be able to give back something to Donald Trump, I think is useful for many, many levels. I think it was a major diplomatic win for Netanyahu to do that. Now, you can ask a good question, Josh. I'm going to play your role as well. But Trump didn't announce that he was going to reduce the tariffs.
True.
Right? And that was really what Netanyahu probably would have hoped to achieve. But I think that you have to look at it in the scope of the global issue, right? And Trump is the author of the book, The Art of the Deal. And Trump is now about to start negotiating with dozens, if not more than 100 world leaders on the issue of tariffs. So there's absolutely no way that Donald Trump is going to commit to what he's going to do to Israel in this public forum and then ground his negotiating position and adjust his leverage for the negotiations with all the other countries. So you could see from the mood in the room that Trump was very appreciative of what Netanyahu did. I think that there will be an announcement about what America will do to and what Israel will do to reduce this trade imbalance and potentially lower these tariffs. And I think you're going to start to see other countries really follow Netanyahu's model in the days and weeks ahead.
So first of all, of course, as you pointed out, a huge difference night and day between the meeting President Trump had with Zelensky, the head of the Ukraine, several weeks ago. That's for sure. And number two, you mentioned negotiating on the tariffs, but the tariffs might have been what spurred this meeting, but negotiating with Iran, that was a top subject here. Also very, very important to the state of Israel. President Trump announcing that this Saturday, and from what I understand, that the meeting is going to take place in Oman, the United States is going to be holding high-level negotiations with the Iranian leadership in order to discuss the nuclear program. President Trump saying basically if those talks don't go anywhere, then President Trump is going to, he alluded to it, perhaps take military action. Let's go to this clip here of President Trump discussing Iran.
We're having direct talks with Iran, and they've started. It'll go on Saturday. We have a very big meeting, and we'll see what can happen. And I think everybody agrees that doing a deal would be preferable to doing the obvious. I think if the talks aren't successful with Iran, I think Iran is going to be in great danger. And I hate to say it, great danger, because they can't have a nuclear weapon.
So the president's stating that it would be obvious what happens next if Iran does not come to some sort of agreement with the United States of America and abandon their nuclear weapons program. So that's where things stand. Again, negotiations going to take place between Iran and the U.S., I should say, this Saturday. And from what I understand, that'll happen in the Middle East in the country of Oman.
Right. We're not sure. There's a little bit of a discrepancy between what the United States is saying and what Iran is saying about whether these are going to be direct negotiations or indirect negotiations. But it's clear now that a very serious negotiations attempt is going to be made. And what came out of the meeting was that there is a runway now to the end of the Iranian nuclear program, and perhaps differences of opinion on how to go about reaching that end between the United States and Israel. Israel probably thinks that negotiations are not going to go anywhere. The Iranians are very likely to try to just buy as much time as possible to say they're going to enter into negotiations, to draw out the negotiations, maybe to give a little piece at a time and then give some weeks and then try to come back to negotiations. It looks like this is probably what's going to be the Iranian tactic. But again, as we said before, Trump is the negotiator who wrote the book, The Art of the Deal. Trump wants to get a deal. I think he understands that if you get into a military conflict with Iran, while you can take out the nuclear facilities in short order, it's very likely to spark some kind of regional conflict. Iran is already threatening that if the talk about military strikes doesn't end, and if it gets to a military strike on Iranian facilities, that other countries in the Middle East are going to be direct targets. And that includes the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Iraq, and certainly Israel, and certainly also United States interests around the region. So there's a lot of countries that really don't want to see this illicit nuclear program ended with a military strike on the facilities. However, if the negotiations don't bear fruit, if U.S. inspectors are not able to come in to all of the facilities and to dismantle that program step by step by step, the same way that the Libyan nuclear program was dismantled many years ago, then Trump said, the obvious, and that Iran will be in great danger. He was alluding to the fact that the patience is not going to be endless, and that there is a credible military threat, at the end of unsuccessful negotiation. And I think that this was backed. I mean, this idea of a credible military threat is really on full display right now when you look at what the United States is doing in Yemen. And Trump made special note to pass the floor to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth in the meeting to discuss at pretty great length what the United States has already done in Yemen to the Houthis and what it is going to do and how the military strikes there are going to intensify. So I think that that's a very important component of the negotiations to tell the Iranians, oh, you don't think that we would strike you militarily? Look at what we're doing right now in Yemen. If you don't negotiate a deal fast, what's happening in Yemen is just the appetizer to the main course that's coming next with a military strike on Iran's nuclear facilities.
Alex, you brought up the Houthis, and in fact, from what I understand, as the meeting was taking place, as you were there in the White House, in fact, that very moment, the United States was attacking the Houthis. You brought up Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's comments. Let's check out that clip.
It's been a bad 3 weeks for the Houthis, and it's about to get worse. It's been a devastating campaign, whether it's underground facilities, weapons manufacturing, bunkers, troops in the open, air defense assets. We are not going to relent. And it's only to get more unrelenting until the Houthis declare they will stop shooting at our ships. And we've been very clear at the Iranians as well. They should not continue to provide support to the Houthis.
So there you have the U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth saying that the situation for the Houthis is about to get worse. We are not going to relent. It's only going to get more. It's only going to be more unrelenting until the Houthis stop attacking U.S. vessels and international vessels there in the Red Sea. So the U.S. there on a prolonged campaign in order to try to weaken the Houthis until they flat out stop firing at those vessels.
Yeah, I think that's right, and that's the United States is really correcting a major wrong of the Biden administration by taking care of the Houthi threat. You know, it's not only that they've been attacking Israel, and Israel attacked the port of Hodeidah in Yemen itself. It's not just a bilateral attack here between Israel and Yemen. The Houthis have been interrupting commercial waterways. We saw just this week President al-Sisi of Egypt state that Egypt has lost $7 billion in revenues from ships that are now afraid to travel through the Suez Canal, which is one of the world's busiest commercial waterways. And the price of goods all over the world has skyrocketed because ships coming from East Asia towards Europe or towards North America have to go around the southern tip of Africa instead of cutting through the world's best and fastest naval shortcut, which is the Suez Canal. And in addition to that, the Houthis have been attacking at United States vessels trying to police the waters of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in the Gulf of Oman, leading towards the Suez Canal. So, there's been direct attacks on American ships. This is international shipping, and therefore the United States, which is supposed to be the world's international policeman, is now taking matters into its own hands. But like I said, I think even the most important component of these attacks on the Houthis in Yemen right now is to send a very strong message to the Iranians that President Trump is not afraid, while he would hope to avoid a military conflict really at all costs, and is giving the Iranians a golden opportunity to negotiate their way out of this crisis, that he is not afraid to use military force.
Alex, another major topic last night was the situation in Gaza. You could see President Trump, just how affected he was by meeting with the Israeli hostages who were released, bringing up that meeting over and over again yesterday, as he's done in the past, just how powerful and impactful that meeting was with the hostages, and probably affecting the way he comes out with policy. Yesterday, he said that the hostages weren't even kept in tunnels. They were being held in pipes. And he said, as he's stated in the past, that there was absolutely no mercy, no goodwill, not even a wink from any of the Hamas captors, letting the hostages know that things were going to be okay. They were going to be freed one day. Let's check out President Trump's remarks saying that he is committed to trying very hard to get the hostages out.
We are trying very hard to get the hostages out. We're looking at another ceasefire. We'll see what happens. But we want to get the hostages out. The Israeli people want the hostages out more than anything. They want the hostages out. This man is working very hard with us to do that. I mean, I don't know. I hope he's being appreciated because he's been a great leader. He's working very, very hard on the hostages and many other things.
President Trump also saying that they are looking at another ceasefire. There were reports yesterday, perhaps another Egyptian initiative. They're serving as a mediator to some sort of deal. I think it was releasing 8 hostages, perhaps, for an extended ceasefire. I think 2-3 month ceasefire. We'll have to see what happens there. At the same time, Prime Minister Netanyahu saying that Israel is committed to getting all the hostages out and eliminating the evil tyranny of Hamas. Let's check out that clip.
We spoke about not only the hostages, but about Gaza. The hostages obviously is a human story of just unbearable agony. I speak to the families. I spoke to them yesterday. Spoke to another one when I was in Hungary before I came here. I speak to them every day. They're in agony. The hostages are in agony, and we want to get them all out. Steve Witkoff, was, President Trump's very able representative, helped us get a deal that got 25 out. We're working now on another deal that we hope will succeed. And we're committed to getting all the hostages out, but also eliminating the evil tyranny of Hamas in Gaza and enabling the people of Gaza to freely make a choice to go wherever they want. I mean, they should have that choice.
Alex, while you were there in the press conference, is there anything new that either Prime Minister Netanyahu added in terms of the hostages that we have not seen in the past? Anything new, or is this more of the same rhetoric in terms of, yes, Israel, of course, wants to get the hostages out, Prime Minister Netanyahu adding there that this has to come with the dismantling of Hamas's military capabilities?
Well, Trump, I believe, spent close to half of the time in the press conference talking about the hostages over and over and over again. I mean, you can tell that he's clearly moved by the plight of the hostages and has absolutely no patience or sympathy for Hamas, for the Palestinians. I think if anybody thinks that Hamas is going to be the ruler of the Gaza Strip at the end of all of this, they're sorely mistaken. I think one of the things that he said was important for the Israeli public at home, which has been accusing Netanyahu of leaving the hostages to die, not doing everything he can to try to bring the hostages home. The president stated in front of global audiences in the Oval Office that Prime Minister Netanyahu was working extremely hard on trying to bring the hostages home. And Trump even went on to say a few times, really effusive statements about the prime minister that how intelligent he is, how much he knows, how good a job he's been doing during this war. And he said, I hope he gets appreciated because he's doing a fantastic job in this war. And unfortunately, I don't think probably most of the Israeli media outlets were picking up that headline, but I think it was very important. And it was discussed, in the context of Netanyahu's efforts to try to bring the hostages back. And you could actually make a really good argument here that, with Trump at your back, having the support to do whatever you want in this war, to finish off Hamas once and for all, to finish off Hezbollah once and for all, to strike against the Iranian nuclear facilities, recognizing that Trump may not be the president forever. I mean, at most it's 4 years. The midterms are coming up at a certain point, and Trump's not going to want to have like major military conflicts ongoing during the run up to the midterm elections, which are going to be very important for him if he wants to have really 4 full years to get his policies accomplished. And you could say that Netanyahu is spending some of these very, very valuable weeks here at the beginning of the Trump presidency, pausing the war, giving ceasefire an opportunity in order to get the hostages back. So really, it's a tremendous, tremendous opportunity cost for Israel and the prime minister for focusing so much on the hostages. And President Trump recognized that in the Oval Office.
President Trump also brought up his plan of voluntary Gaza immigration. For those Gazans who had enough being on the front lines of a war, he wants to turn to other countries, perhaps in the region and beyond, in order to give these people an opportunity, as in any other situation around the world. And the president mentioned that in any other country, people who are caught in a war have the opportunity to free, other than when it comes to Gaza. And the Gazans are being held there by Hamas on the front lines. So him, I guess, doubling down or maybe tripling down, he's mentioned it several times, his plan for immigration of those Gazans who want to leave and flee the front lines of a war.
Yeah, he talked about Gaza resettlement. He talked about the United States sending in some kind of a peacekeeping force to guard Gaza while the process of rebuilding is taking place. He even talked again, doubling down on the idea of ownership stake being taken perhaps in Gaza. So you could see that the president is committed to finding some other home for the Gazan residents. It seems clear that his initial idea of trying to push them into Egypt or into Jordan might be more complicated than he originally thought. But Netanyahu ordered the Mossad already in the last couple of weeks to start identifying other countries that could be homes for Gazan citizens, Gazan residents. Netanyahu talked over and over again about just giving a choice to the people that want to leave. And I think all indications are that at least half of Gazans would be absolutely willing to leave and go to greener pastures if they were given a real opportunity to do so. We've heard in the last week or so possible plans floated regarding Gazan resettlement in Syria. There could be various reasons why that might not be the best idea because it's still really right on Israel's border, and Syria is a completely unstable country, and being backed by Turkey and being run by al-Jolani, the head of this HTS faction, which is affiliated with Al-Qaeda. You could see a reestablishing of a Sunni ring of fire around Israel instead of the Iranian Shiite ring of fire around Israel if the Palestinians move there. But we have to see what develops in the coming weeks regarding where Gazan residents might be able to go.
I'm glad you brought up Syria, because this is the final topic we're going to discuss about yesterday's press conference. And President Trump saying that he would be willing to mediate between Turkey and Israel vis-a-vis Syria. We know the Turkish influence in Syria, Turkey wanting to establish a stronghold there. President Trump says he's willing to mediate, and there appears to be, perhaps in the very near future, perhaps potentially at least, a conflict between Israel and Turkey over what's going on there in Syria. Trump saying he has a great relationship with Turkish President Erdogan, who he likes very much and called very smart. He even congratulated Erdogan on taking over, and he already said basically Turkey is the one responsible for what's going on in Syria. Turkey essentially took over Syria through their proxies. And President Trump there saying in 2,000 years, nobody's been able to take over Syria, yet President Erdogan did. I guess that's President Trump respecting the strength. It was a little bit, for me, watching that, uncomfortable to see that this, individual world leader who's been bashing Israel time and time again, especially since October 7th and even way beyond. I mean, this has gone back at least 15 years. A little uncomfortable for me to watch President Trump talking about Turkey and Erdogan with such high esteem, such high regard. But nevertheless, as a mentor of ours stated last night, it's not about friendships, it's about interests. And that's what President Trump was really focused on there.
Yeah, I think that's right. And when you look at the two meetings that Netanyahu's had with President Trump since he came into office, there's a little bit of a troubling pattern. In the first meeting, President Trump was asked directly about the Qatari influence and whether they were an enemy state. All of a sudden now in Israel, you see that the left wing is very quickly shifted its approach and is now considering Qatar to be an enemy when they were praising Qatar in the beginning. But Trump had said in that first meeting, that Qatar was part of the solution, not part of the problem. And now here in the second meeting, saying similar about Turkey, that he's got a great relationship. And I think if you look at what's going on across the greater Middle East, the main threat is Iran. Okay, and the terror proxies that Iran is sponsoring. Israel and the United States are concurrently filing down the terror proxies, Hamas. They filed down Hezbollah and the Houthis, and now attention is shifting towards Iran. Okay, and what you don't want to do is to widen the conflict and now make this Israel against every major country in the Middle East, right? So I think what Trump is trying to do is to demonstrate to Qatar, to Turkey, that the Iranian threat is coming to an end, and he would like to see a reset in the entire Middle East. And he's giving Erdogan a ladder to climb down. He's giving the Qataris a ladder to climb down. Perhaps the Qataris will invest money into the resettlement of Gazans elsewhere, and perhaps into the rebuilding effort in the Gaza Strip. And perhaps Turkey will recognize that Trump is being very generous towards him, and that if he just bides his time and doesn't push forward, that he can be in good standing with the American president, which I believe will be in Erdogan's interest. So I think the undercurrent behind what Trump is saying is, okay, we see what you did in Syria. Assad was a bad guy. You stepped in, take the win, but just calm down and stop where you are, because I'm giving this to you. I'm letting you have what you did. Okay. And we don't want to get into a situation where I'm not saying nice things about you in the future. So I think that Trump is trying to alleviate the pressure between Israel and Turkey. I mean, he said that explicitly, that he would step in and be the mediator to alleviate the tensions between Israel and Turkey. So, let's wait and see on that.
Alex, after all that, we were planning for this week's show. I thought it would be just about Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to Hungary, to Budapest this week, and his meetings with Prime Minister Viktor Orban. That wasn't the case. You hopped on the plane and went with the Prime Minister to Washington, D.C. But let's go back, if we can, to those meetings this past Thursday between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. One of the highlights of that trip was the fact that Hungary decided to openly side with the state of Israel, show their support, and leave the ICC. That was a major win for Israel. Also, very warm relations. We saw a very positive meeting there. Hungary, one of the only countries, along with the U.S., willing to recognize Prime Minister Netanyahu. And just one other thing, I saw that even some of these countries were threatening, if Prime Minister Netanyahu used their airspace on his trip from Hungary to the United States, that perhaps they would send up fighter jets and try to bring down, not shoot down the plane, but force the plane to land, all this crazy stuff. But that's just a side point. You can talk about that as well. But let's focus on what you learned in Hungary from the meetings there with Prime Minister Netanyahu and Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
Well, as you mentioned, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, also for former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant back in February. And quite frankly, Netanyahu is not safe to touch down in many countries around the world, particularly countries in Western Europe, which were places that Netanyahu had often visited over his extended tenure as Israel's prime minister. The moment that those arrest warrants were issued, Viktor Orban, who's really proven himself to be one of Prime Minister Netanyahu's closest friends, and a really bold world leader, and we'll talk about that in a minute, said that Netanyahu will always have safe passage to come to Hungary. And Netanyahu really wanted to demonstrate that he's not landlocked by the ICC arrest warrants. So he decided to take Orban up on his invitation, and he was rewarded with Viktor Orban formally announcing that Hungary will start the process to fully withdraw from the International Criminal Court, which Orban called a political tool. He said that, this used to be an important court and that the world needs to have an important court, but unfortunately that the court, like other international institutions, is being used as a political tool, which is not something that you want. And and Orban, who actually brought Hungary in to the International Criminal Court at the beginning of his own extended tenure as prime minister, has now formally pulled out. So that was a major win for Prime Minister Netanyahu. And what the prime minister said in his press conference with Orban, when he praised Orban for pulling out of the ICC, is that while Hungary will certainly be the first country to withdraw from the ICC, that he predicted that Hungary will not be the last country.
People should check out Alex's article called Netanyahu, Orban, and Trump Defy ICC and a Morally Bankrupt Global Order to get a full, in-depth analysis of the meetings between the Prime Minister of Israel and Hungary. At the same time, Alex, you also spoke and met with Balázs, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Orban, not related to Viktor Orban, a member of the National Assembly of Hungary and an advisor to Viktor Orban. Talk about that meeting.
Yes, Balázs Orban is the political director of Hungary, and political director is a position that they also have in England. It's basically Orban's chief domestic and foreign political advisor. So, on all kind of political issues, the younger Orban and Balázs is just like 39 years old, I believe, much younger than Viktor Orban. And like you said, they're not related. And I think at some point, Balázs, who's a rising star, political star in Hungary, is either going to majorly benefit from having the same name as the current prime minister, or will be a detriment to him at some point in the future. We don't know. We hope the former, because Balázs is extremely talented, and he really explained in depth, why the ICC, why Hungary was pulling out of the ICC. But in addition to that, he really sat down with me and expounded on what we discussed as civilizational issues that are taking place in the world now, where you have these global, what he called neoliberal institutions pushing an agenda to really attack the traditional family, to attack national sovereignty, and to try to take away the rights of individual nations to run their own economies, to have their own political systems and agendas. So we went into great detail on all of that. And he basically said that he believes that we're now entering into what he called an era of sovereignty, like that there's a new world order taking place, that conservative thinking is taking hold now all across Europe, which is happening as a result of the failed, what he called neoliberal policies, particularly mass migration of Muslims coming through into Europe. And Hungary was one of the only countries that actually pushed back against the European Union's policy that all countries needed to accept millions of illegal Muslim immigrants. And in fact, and I didn't even know this beforehand, but Hungary is paying a penalty of €1,000,000 a day to the European Union in monies that I think that the EU is supposed to be giving to Hungary. They're withholding €1,000,000 a day from Hungary for not accepting mass amounts of Muslim immigrants into their borders. And Balázs Orban explained that this wasn't a unilateral decision. They actually put this decision to the Hungarian people. They had a national referendum on the issue, and it was basically decided that the cost of absorbing massive amounts of illegal Muslim migrants into Hungary would cost much more than paying €1,000,000 a day. And you know what? I think he's right. And if you take a walk down the streets of Budapest, which is an absolutely beautiful city, I think it rivals any of the most beautiful in Europe. The city feels young. It feels safe. There's definitely Muslims there. We saw Muslims there, but the Muslims looked like they were happy to be there. Usually it was like a husband and a wife, walking together. You didn't see like just bands of like Muslim men just like walking around. There's certainly no go zones. The city's clean, and it looks like Budapest is actually going to probably become one of the most important cities in Europe in the coming years. So I was very taken back by Balázs Orban. I was impressed with the press conference. I think it was a major victory for Netanyahu. And of course, it ended with an invitation to go to the White House. So, really I think all around it was a tremendous diplomatic a tour for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, it sounds like Hungary's policies make sense both financially and in terms of safety of their citizens. Just one last meeting you had, I want to mention here. I hope I'm getting the name correct. You met with Mikolos Santos, the Director General of the Center for Foundational Rights in Hungary. Discuss that meeting.
Yeah, it was very similar. This is the number one conservative think tank in Hungary. They actually are the organizers of the CPAC Hungary. Miklos, who was also a really young political director of this conservative think tank, really expounded even further on the issues that we just spoke about with Balázs Orbán. And Santo is actually coming to Jerusalem at the end of the month to participate in the JNS International Policy Summit. So hopefully people will get the opportunity to hear what he has to say about the relationship between Hungary and Israel, which we also discussed in depth, and the very similar threats that both Israel and Hungary face. And I'll just add one of the things that we also discussed both with Santos and also with Balázs Orbán was how liberal institutions, including the Biden administration, have been putting millions and millions of dollars into efforts to unseat the governments both in Hungary and in Israel. So you could see that there's a lot of similarities, and I really do think, and I wrote about this in the article, that Netanyahu, Trump, and Orbán, I think, are really three of the most consequential world leaders right now, and they're certainly fighting against what Trump calls, in America, the deep state. But what is this? What Balázs Orbán refers to as this neoliberal ideology. But you could see that there's really some deep corruption in the world when you have foreign countries trying to undermine governments, and when you have and they're trying to do it from inside the countries. And so you see, Orbán, Netanyahu, Trump, all facing similar threats, and the chances of them overcoming these threats are strengthened when they band together and discuss their shared experiences.
Alex, as a result of the meeting with the United States, we are not going to get to all the other topics we were going to discuss this week, but I think you've done an excellent job hitting on the major points of the trip to Hungary by Prime Minister Netanyahu and the trip to the United States. So thank you for that. Alex, when are you coming back? And number two, are you going to be ready in time for the holiday of Passover, which starts this Saturday night, which means we're not going to record next week, but are you going to be ready? You're going to come back in time?
Yeah, we're planning on boarding the Wings of Zion back to Israel in just a few hours from now. So hopefully back in Israel, not just in time to start the holiday, but in time to roll up my sleeves and participate in some of the intensive Passover pre-cleaning and turning over our kitchen for what is going to be, one of my favorite holidays, the week-long Passover festival that really, relives the Exodus from Egypt and how God acted with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm to protect the Jewish people. And I think that we feel today that God's mighty hand and outstretched arm is protecting the state of Israel from what could be existential damage. So we celebrate the miracles that took place to the Jewish people as they left Egypt, and hopefully we will soon also have an exodus from this period of instability and damage, and be ushered into a new era of peace and the spreading of spiritual light and strength to the entire world in hopefully really in the coming days, months, and weeks ahead.
Alex, thank you for your great reporting. Have a safe trip home. Have a happy Passover, and we will see you back in studio the next time we record Jerusalem Minute. Thanks so much.
Happy Passover.
Happy Passover to all. Thank you to our wonderful production team behind the scenes for all the work they do. here on Jerusalem Minute. My name is Josh Hasten, coming to you from the beautiful JNS Media Hub here in Jerusalem. Alex Traiman is across the pond in the United States, heading back home, arriving shortly before Passover. We'll talk to you on our next program, Jerusalem Minute. Make sure you keep it logged into JNS TV for all the amazing content JNS has to offer. And go to jns.org for all the latest breaking news from Israel, the Middle East, and the entire Jewish world. Chag Sameach, happy Passover to all.